Welcome to What the Biz, where we talk about building successful businesses, balancing life, and all the WTB in between. With your hosts, me, Richard Pyatt.
I'm Brigitte Vector.
And I'm Dan Prochko.
Well, greetings, folks. Welcome back to another What the Biz. Happy to have you along with us today. Richard here with Brigitte and Dan. Our last conversation, when to hire, is going to lead to a discussion today about outsourcing versus hiring in-house, and we'll talk about that coming up. How's everybody today?
Doing good. A lot of sales calls recently, so really a lot of focus on that right now. A lot of growth, trying to bring in some new clients. I've shared in the past, we're bringing on a new team member, so it's kind of like trying to have the clients to make sure you can really afford and pay for it and be really comfortable with it. You know, it's that whole piece. I know I've shared, we've had interns in the past and all of that, but like we want to do something real permanent, as it were, as a position. So just making sure all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and that we've got that cushion, as it were. Mm-hmm. So, man, it's just been proposal after proposal, which is exciting. They're not all going to close. I know that. I know sales, numbers game, but it's exciting. It is exciting because I'm looking forward to getting rid of those tasks off my plate, so I can focus on more growth and certain other more valuable, exciting things, and just bring everybody along. So, it's been a lot of that.
And while all that's exciting and you're figuring out like, okay, where's our sweet spot of when we can hire? You know, you finally tackle that, and then it's we have to go through the whole interview and make sure we have the right It's like, I swear every day of business ownership is replacing one stressful thing with the next stressful thing. It's like that's great, we did that, but let's go to the next one.
I'd like to try it and see if the next stressful thing I like better.
That's exactly where I was going with it. Is like, I'm just going to hire enough people to just whittle my plate down to only the stressful things I enjoy. Like that's the goal. Like, I like these things. That's all I want to do.
Right. Oh my goodness. That's exciting though. You've not had a third employee, a third person under your roof at this point, and now you will. That's a threshold you're crossing.
No, it is. It's huge. We've had contractors, we've had partners, we've outsourced, which is so perfect for this. Whether it be, we do websites, we've outsourced certain builds, we've outsourced, design work, we've outsourced other things. But we obviously kept the quality control. We did the final touches and everything, but having someone in-house, like building that culture and like trying to impact, our community and other things, like that's really what we want to do. And, so it's exciting. That's it. Yeah. It's exciting. A lot of work though, but finding that perfect person, Brigitte, you're so right on it.
Yeah.
It's, and you never know until you hire them. Like you never really know. And so I used to have this whole thing of like, hire fast, fire fast. And no, that's really not a good way to do it. And so it's more like hire slow, fire slow, which also isn't great, is what it's turned into, but it's also not great. So, we're trying to find that sweet spot, as it were.
I probably shouldn't say it because I'm not going to say the stat right, but I have a friend who's spent the majority of her career in human resources, and she quotes a stat, something like 50% of the hires made are not the right person, basically. And she threw that out, and I said, what? And she said, yep, I'm not kidding. So it really is interesting because you're right. It's difficult to know for real if you have the right person. And I'll tell you what, I've been through it in my pre-entrepreneurial life where you've met someone, you've hired them, and you find out, boy, maybe this wasn't the right thing. One time, I can tell you, this one's brief, I promise. One time I did it, hired this person. They were in another town. First day, came in, a completely different person, stirred up a bunch of dust with her boss, told us she's not moving after all to town. And so I went to my boss and I said, I think we got a problem here. Let me talk to her. He comes to me afterwards. That's not the person we hired. This was on day one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That person lasted like 2 days. day and a half, maybe. So you say, how could that happen? Right. You met them several times, talked several times, felt so in sync that you made the offer, and then their evil twin showed up on the first day.
Yeah. I've heard of some crazy hiring gauntlets, as it were. There's a company here in Kalamazoo. I won't mention who, but I had a couple friends apply and actually go through interviews, and they had to go through like 10 interviews.
Wow.
With multiple mini projects along the way.
10?
Yeah, 10. They had to meet with every department head, and they couldn't, and like the way the company worked, like they just were never at the same place at the same time to do it jointly. And each head had their own set of questions, and they had to meet with other team members. I mean, it was a real cultural thing. Like they were trying to get them in front of many people of the company to see, you know, personality and fit. And like one of the things was like, we're going to lunch together. Another thing was, we're going to go do this activity after hours. Another thing was, yeah, we'll be in the office. And it was just like, how would you, you know, approach a project like this? And really, I mean, interesting, but that's long. That's crazy.
Sure. Imagine if you don't get the job after.
I was going to say to go through all of that with the chance of not. Oh.
Yeah.
It must have been something they really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the two friends made it through and actually did go to work there, but ended up being a 1099, not even an employee. And it was like, whoa, what? Yeah.
Holy cow.
It was crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, boy, all of these nuances sort of fit in nicely with the subject today. So it's pretty good, right?
I know we've kind of bashed on hiring so much. It's almost just like we're all really leaning toward outsourcing, and it's so not true. Because obviously I'm trying to hire, you know, Brigitte, we've talked before about you, and you've got a ton that you've hired already. So yeah, I'm looking forward to today. So yeah. Where do you all fall? Where do you fall? In, out? Like just quick gauge, in, out.
Oh, it depends on the position, honestly.
Love it. Such a great answer. Way to not fall for the fool's choice.
If it is something that can be outsourced, it should be outsourced. So many businesses try to keep things in-house that really would benefit them to be outsourced and more cost effective. I think it kind of takes the spin that a lot of businesses think it needs to be. Everything needs to be in. And I'm more of a, hey, let's be a giver to other small businesses. If I can outsource that, I'm going to outsource it. Absolutely.
So you anticipated what question I was going to ask you, because being a finance person, is that based in financial thinking? If you outsource, you're not paying benefits, et cetera. It's easier on the budget.
It is. Yeah. And it completely depends on the position, which is why, you know, what we talked about last week is so important to really outline those tasks and what is proprietary almost to your business. What do you want to keep to yourself? And what is something that it's like, I don't care who does this as long as it's done.
I like what you said. Like if it can be outsourced, it should be outsourced, you know,
save the money.
And last week, you know, we talked about it too. I come at it from the angle of like, what type of company do I want to have? Meaning like, what's the secret sauce? What is our thing that really needs to stay in-house? Because that's our thing, you know, and those are like our processes and our secret sauce to what drives results. You know, that's what stays in-house. Everything else could be outsourced, in my opinion, you know. I mean, even actually pieces of our secret sauce could be outsourced. You know, we've been outsourcing for years, you know, websites. Sure. We'll do a base design. We don't have to do the build. Other people can build it. You know, there's certain copywriting where it's just like for certain projects, whether it be websites or ads or content like blog posts, etc. We'll come up with, you know, the topics and everything, and maybe even an outline and some requirements, but we don't have to do the writing. So it's really interesting. Like even within the secret sauce, there's certain pieces that can be outsourced, and we have outsourced them. So I really like it. I like that statement, Brigitte. You know, if it can be outsourced, it should be.
There's actually another like reasoning I have behind that, and it isn't even finance driven, which is shocking. But there's a lot of turnover, as every business owner knows. You have employees leaving, and it could be good employees that leave. And I fully believe a lot of times it's because business owners try to keep things in-house. So they assign so many different hats to certain people that they're not working in the thing that actually brings them passion. And too often their role becomes more than what they thought it was going to be, or it's in so many different areas. So not only is that person not thriving anymore, but you're also not getting the best quality work for whatever you're trying to fill. So you kind of have a double edge. If you pile on that into, those tasks on the in-house employees that might not necessarily love it, you run the risk of losing them too. And the cost to hiring again, and the process and the time and it just, like I said,
such a great point. Yeah.
You can outsource certain things.
It's interesting you say that.
Put it in that kind of a lens, it's a hedge against all the costs associated with hiring. That's awesome. That's a great lens.
I have a client now who's an entrepreneur, and she described her reason for becoming an entrepreneur, basically what you just described, Brigitte. She was in a job where she saw an opportunity to grow that position in a way that she liked, but she thought also benefited the organization. And her boss said, "Don't do that." Mm-hmm. And she said, "Goodbye." Not right away, of course, but it led to that. Yes,
it is such a true thing anymore, and I don't know if it's pandemic driven or what. Obviously, since we went through that a couple of years ago. People are recognizing that more often. I feel like they're saying, I don't love this, and I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the whole term, the Great Resignation was coined. It's like, it's real. People are not gonna stick around doing a ton of menial tasks that they don't want to do, and if they can go work for a firm where they can specialize in that, they're gonna go there. And that's who we would outsource to then, yes. And that's helpful. I mean, there are those who love to write, but they don't all like to write emails. Maybe they want to do long form. So they're going to go to a firm that specializes in content. Maybe they like numbers. And so they're going to work as a bookkeeper, but they don't want to do the sales. They don't want to do the account management. So they're just going to stay in that individual contributor role. And so that gives us these great opportunities of partners to work with, where we don't have to constantly hire internally, and we can find the partners we want. So,
and that is another facet to when you do hire, you add that once you hire an internal employee, you've got a whole different management hat that you have to wear, and you have to ensure that you're keeping them engaged and ensure that you're letting them work in the areas where they thrive, and ensure, because you don't want the turnover. So you've added a different component to, hiring. And there are some things that just make more sense to be outsourced.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I put that under the hidden cost tab of hiring and having employees. I mean, there's the obvious ones that you and me right now are kind of calculating, which is like, okay, what are the payroll taxes I'm responsible for? What are the insurance, workers' comp, other things I now have to have? Those are like real concrete, but the non-concrete ones are like, okay, I've got onboarding of this new person. How do I get them ready for our culture and actually help them assimilate, or us assimilate them and us evolve to match them as well? Because it's not just one-sided. How do I keep them engaged, which is what you were just talking about before, that they are feeling challenged and like they're actually providing value day in, day out. And I'm trying to think of like other hidden costs, it's just like all those other things like water cooler talk, the social hours that aren't on the clock, et cetera. None of these are negative. They're not like negative costs. They just are costs. They take either time or they take resources, attention, and it's just all those things that you don't think about that you don't always have to do when you outsource. With that said, there are hidden costs of outsourcing. I mean, you don't have that cultural connection. I've definitely outsourced things and it's like, that's not what I asked for. And I just get something that's not even close to what I asked for. And it's like, oh man, now we're just losing time. Or, maybe there's a language barrier, other elements. There are huge hidden costs to outsourcing as well, or could be the same huge cost as hiring internally on both sides. So yeah,
sometimes it's a frame of mind between one and the other too, which determines the product, the output that you get, if that makes sense. So I am reminded of a long time ago when I was managing a newsroom. And when I started doing that, we had some part-time reporters, and they had beats they were covering, but they were not part of the team in the sense that they were in the newsroom daily with all of us. They would come in and cover things in the evening, and then you'd come in the next morning and what they produced was waiting for you. And I began to think we could probably take these part-timers and thank them for their service and hire a full-timer with whom we would interact more on a daily basis, and the output would be different. And so I had to convince the bean counters, sorry, Brigitte, to do that because they would have to add the benefits to the position. They weren't paying for that at that time with part-timers, right? But we did it, and we ended up with better content and better interaction with that person. So I think that's part of what you're talking about. And maybe it's a thought you have to have between outsourcing and even someone part-time. But if they're part of your organization and they feel that way, that might give you a higher quality product. However, as you said, Brigitte, you're investing more in that person. And as Dan said, if you have an outsourced organization and it's not working out, it might be easier to part ways and associate with a different one. So you stirred up all those thoughts as I was thinking about that.
No, unfortunately, you just outlined there's pros and cons to both sides. I mean, honestly, there's different weights to either way that you do it. I mean, just like if you're going to hire in-house, hire an employee, a contractor is the same thing. If you're going to outsource, you almost have to vet it the same way because you want a partner that you're actually going to want to work with, and everybody operates different. Like I can say with my firm on the bookkeeping side, we have really focused on businesses that have tried to hire in-house and they are struggling with turnover and keeping that in-house.
Interesting.
And that's one of the worst things to have go. And then they try to let people do it that also either aren't qualified or they don't love it. It just gets added onto their task list and then they end up losing them and there's your turnover again.
Right.
I would say where we're unique in our offerings is my team members are assigned to a client. So you get that person. And if you have weekly finance meetings, that team member is at that client's weekly finance meeting. Like we are involved with their team or their executives. So I think that's where we're kind of different. We are providing that offering where you still get that feel like, oh, they're still part of us, but we are outsourced. And so it's all in who you're going to outsource to and the value that they're going to provide. So, if you do want to outsource something, make sure that they want to be part of your team. And it's not we're sending them a check and we don't see them for 4 months kind of scenario. There's different value to who you can outsource to. So.
Well, so you make an interesting point, and one that's, I think, well taken, that your approach, the approach that you have developed as an organization and the culture you've tried to foster in your own organization is one in which you're trying to bring the best of both worlds, right? You're trying to offer an outsourcing option that feels something like they've brought someone in because that person is well connected with them, or at least it feels that way, which is the point.
Absolutely. I mean, so they know about their kids' birthdays, and family events. And I mean, the culture of our company is family. So, we want our clients to feel that too. And finance is, just as an example, is one of the most personal things to any business. And so if you're not going to be personal with that business, then, that isn't a great outsourced option. That's why it's important to find a great outsourced partner.
Fully agree. I love that you pivoted toward the value side, talking about that. We're very similar. We sit down with leadership teams, and that's, we're part of that team and work with multiple members. On that value side, I wanted to compare this back to last week's episode where we talked about the tasks and like how big a role might be. If a role isn't always big enough for a full-time position, sometimes it's more valuable to outsource because you actually may get a lot more value out of that partnership than hiring someone part-time internally. One reason that comes to mind, and this is true universally for outsourcing, is that usually you're not outsourcing to get one person. You're outsourcing to a team. And so that's true with us, is that when you outsource to us, it's a team of marketers, our other partners, contractors, our internal team, et cetera. It's not just one person thinking and working on your account. So while you're building that relationship with the account manager, as it were, I put that in quotes, whoever's, responsible for that client, but there's a whole other team of creative people thinking about what goes into this. And you can't do that for a part-time, if you're hiring a part-time, are you going to get one person? Are you going to get someone super creative or really good at numbers or really good at storytelling, like super, super good, for a part-time wage? Probably not. I mean, maybe, but probably not. But could you outsource for that? Definitely. And that just also grows exponentially if you don't hire full-time as well. If you just continue to outsource, you could just get so many more deliverables, for a cost that is less than the amount of people you'd have to hire internally to do it as well. Because these outsourced partners you work with, they have the infrastructure already set up. They have all the expertise already hired, and this actually obviously dovetails, with the conversation of keeping people in-house, because let's look at marketing. We touch on websites, we touch on email, we touch on ads, we touch on copywriting. That's 4 different experts. Mm-hmm. And when you hire us, you're paying the same amount as one full-timer, let's just say, but you're getting 4 full-timers out of it. Wow. That's huge value right there. And so that's one way, that's a big way that outsourcing can actually value an organization or drive value.
You're heading in the same direction that I was about to head in. And that is that what I do, for example, exists because outsourcing is possible and that people consider doing it and do carry that out regularly. Otherwise, I might not exist. We really don't talk about this much. We talked about it in the beginning, but Brigitte has a bookkeeping business. Dan and his wife own and run a marketing business. And my business is unique in the sense that it is really a content development business. As a former radio interviewer, I help businesses, organizations, mission-based, visionary people who want to share their story. But here's where the outsourcing part comes in. Who has time to sit there and figure out a podcast series, what they should talk about, how they carry it out, how do they post it, how do they share it, all these things. Most people look at me and say, I don't have time for that. And right. Not to mention the whole idea of flipping a mic on or a camera on and then trying to fill that time themselves with that content, whereas an interviewer can help them sort through all that. So there's where outsourcing is valuable. There are things you would outsource that you just don't have time to do. And why would you want to hire an expert? Maybe you do. I don't know. But generally, I don't think companies want to hire a podcaster. I'm going to hire a podcaster for our business.
Well, because it's more than a podcaster. I mean, you've got your editor. You've got, sound engineer. You've got, you got to create the room, so that's all part of sound engineering. You've got your account manager type or whatever that's like show running producer, et cetera. I mean, there's so much that goes into running a podcast. Like if you're hiring one person, they have to be an expert in all of that. That's a pretty penny that an organization is going to have to spend. Whereas working with an organization like yours that has specialized, they don't have to hold all of that infrastructure.
They don't,
and everything. And it's a huge benefit.
So there are things out there. There are real pros to hiring an outsource or outsourcing a company to do certain things that you would need done. And
I mean, honestly, even if I could figure out how to put content out in a podcast format or whatnot, let's say I could finagle that, there is no way. Like I would be like, no, my time is much better spent elsewhere in my business. That's a Richard thing. We're going to just let Richard do that.
Yes.
Well, and so the same can be said for marketing. I would say too, and Dan knows this, having been in radio too. We would see companies without a marketing person on staff. And there's a reason for that. It's not in the budget. And the owner needs to be focused on their core business. They don't have time to be playing around trying to figure out the answers to the marketing questions. Same thing with the component of marketing, which is podcasting. So there's some real good reasons to do it.
So like we've been talking a lot about, some of the back office extra things, I guess, as it were, sort of, because, marketing is, it's not an add-on or optional. It's really there. The same, and if podcasting is part of that, it is. Where I'm going with this is like, don't just think of the ancillary things. There's pieces of like your actual business, like the value you provide to your customers that could be outsourced as well. I know many businesses where, their core business is, say, like printing. They don't own printing shops. They outsource all their printing. But what they do is they help you create that project and understand how to execute it. So it's that account management. So really their piece is they're a project management firm that specializes in a certain area. They could even be like, most of the clothing designers don't make their own clothing. A lot of that's outsourced as well. It's just a special label printed on the back. A lot of that's made in similar types of manufacturing facilities, and they're all over the place. So, you need something painted. All you need to do is create the design. You hire the company that does the painting. You don't have to have painters on staff. There's so many ways to think about this outsource versus in-house, and it really depends on what you want your core competency to be, and what you actually specialize in. That's the piece that tends to stay in-house, and the rest tends to be outsourced. So just full circle, even if it's the main thing, if it can be outsourced, it should be. That's like the mantra,
or at
today.
Least off the owner's plate,
or at the very least,
at the very plate. Bottom of this.
So true. So
utilize your time, your employees' time, everybody's time in the most effective manner.
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
Yeah.
So if you were to put side by side the hidden costs of either option, what would they be?
Oh, good question.
Well, employees, the top one that comes to mind is taxes.
Yeah,
a lot of businesses don't necessarily fully take all of that into account, their employer side. You then have the payroll cost.
Yeah, training on the employer side, on the employee side, I'd say that too. It tends to be a lot more than many think is needed. It's not enough to like show someone how to do their job once or twice. It's ongoing. Like training should be an ongoing thing.
I think the cost associated, if you were going to break down the hours of whoever's spending training as well, there is a cost component to that. Even if an owner isn't paying themselves, that is a cost because that time is not being spent somewhere else.
Yeah.
On the that's interesting.
On the outsource side, I'd say communication, culture. It's kind of the big one, just making sure that those things are in place, because it's really easy to drop the ball there. Clarity over deliverables.
Outsourcing has less hidden cost, I would say, outside of the obvious of what Dan was alluding to earlier, is if you don't get the delivered product that you were hoping at the level you were hoping it for.
Yeah. And a lot of that can be taken care of. A lot of that can be taken care of earlier in the process. So long as at the beginning, prior to working together, it's really clear, here's what the deliverables are of our agreement, that can be alleviated pretty easily.
I think it's interesting you talked about training in the viewpoint of hiring somebody as an employee and then training them, as opposed to hiring an outsourced firm. It's not considered training. What's the difference there? We think that they have a certain expertise. So as long as they understand our culture and what we want, and we've communicated that clearly, they should know how to do it. No, is that the difference?
I think there's a different training component when you outsource.
Okay.
Because the task alone that you're outsourcing, they are typically an expert in, but there is a training component of how it fits to your business. Like they have to learn pieces of your business and your culture. So it's a different training component. And depending on who you hire, they may have the expertise that an outsourced person would have as well already. So there may be a similarity in that. But the ongoing training is much different. There wouldn't be such an ongoing training with an outsource versus an internal hire.
To add on to that, what I would say is when outsourcing, it's usually you're outsourcing because you don't have a competency internally to do it. So you're actually leaning on that partner to have the whole process. So really it's the outsourced partner training you on how this all works.
Or guiding,
or guiding, exactly. Well, right. I'm just using the term training as that was the label this all got put under, but the training piece ends up being that culture, that communication. This is how we work together, or this is how I want my business to grow and be. And that's what keeps getting, communicated and trained to the outsource so they evolve with you. But usually you're outsourced because you're trying to outsource the competency because you just don't have it and you don't want to train it internally. And that's why internally training is so much more important, because either you don't have it and you've got to figure out how to build it from scratch, or someone has it like Brigitte was talking about, and they have to take their time away from what they do to train others continuously to do it better. And that's all cost on that way.
Well, so a couple of notes on the outsourcing that you just brought to my mind when you were talking about communication. I think that is one of the quickest ways to know if somebody is going to be a great outsourcing partner or not, is they should be taking the initiative to ensure that communication channels are clearly outlined. And if whoever you're going to outsource to is not solidifying, like, how do we keep in contact? What does that look like? How often do we talk? Who is my point of contact? Like, have a point of contact for them within your company if it isn't you. But if they aren't taking that initiative to make that piece feel comfortable, they probably aren't going to be a great long-term outsourcing solution.
There's no, well, there probably is, but I was going to say there's no worse feeling than having a contractor and you say, what are they doing? Where are they on this project? I don't know. There probably is something worse than that. But for the sake of conversation, I was saying there's nothing worse than not knowing how to get things done with that partner you've identified.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
You talked about the difference between training an internal person and working with an outsourced company. You really do. When you hire somebody, you've begun now to make a commitment to that individual, and that does feel a little different, doesn't it? I had an old boss
Your feelings.
Yes, I had an old boss who used
this is where feelings matter. This is where feelings matter. They definitely matter here. And if we've never said our piece about feelings, that may come out later. This is maybe just an inside joke, but feelings do matter here. Like when it comes to culture and interpersonal hiring, feelings definitely matter. We always want to make sure things are awesome there. So for
Nothing more than feelings. Anybody know that
harped
song?
on that way too much just now. It's like we have to explain the joke, but we won't. We'll do that another time.
So it fits right in with what my old boss used to say. If you're not in love, don't get married. And he would say that, we were talking about hiring people. If we were, he would ask me, how are we doing with that search for so-and-so? Well, I don't know, this or that. Okay, well, we're not in love. Don't get married. That's what he'd say.
Totally. Totally true. That's how we went through our hiring, was like, looking at obvious, what criteria do they meet? We had a little exercise for them that wasn't obscene, and it was like, okay, did they meet the project requirements for that? All right, cool. Now, do we feel like we like them? Like that's going to matter. Culture. Do we feel like we like them? We don't know if they're going to fit until we hire them. So like you just can't know, but like, can we get a gauge that we're going to enjoy working with it? Can we gauge that?
That's a big part of it, isn't it?
I thought you said, can we get engaged? And I was like, it's perfect with what Richard said.
Not if you're not in love.
It's so true though. And I think over time, we probably get better at trusting those gut instincts. But in the beginning, when you're like, I need to hire, and you're drowning, it's kind of like, oh, this is going to work just fine. And then you realize, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And there's something to just,
no.
Yeah. And there is something to just taking action and trying, like you can go back. Like it is true. It totally sucks for the person if you have to fire them. It totally sucks for an outsource if you have to, sever ties. But, there is nothing wrong with going back. It is all right. I mean, but hopefully you just don't knee jerk all the time. I think that what I'm getting at is like, if you've got a lot of pressure, sometimes it's better to take action than do nothing and try and be perfect. Like you when there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders and you need to get stuff off and you need to hire, you'll figure it out. It's okay. You're going to get there. And we've all been there. So you're going to do well too.
This is true. And how did you do it? Yes, right. How did you do it? Outsource? Hire in? What were your experiences? By the way, Dan, when you were hiring, did you get 400 applications or were you struggling to find them?
Neither on both fronts. Okay. We actually got applications because we made enough partnerships with certain applicant funnels, as it were, university, etc. But we didn't even get 40. It was like,
oh goodness, okay.
Well, did you use a like hiring platform? Did you go to that? Because you would have been flooded. You did.
We did, and we didn't get flooded. So it must have been something about the way we wrote it. Something did get brought to my attention about how we wrote it, and maybe we talk about that another time. But there was something in there that threw some people off. So little learning for us. We wrote a position that was trying to bring together two types of people that are not the same type of person. So yeah, so we learned something.
Boy, that is a whole other conversation.
It sounds like business outtakes.
Yeah, right.
Fail.
Yeah, fail. It was. That job description was a fail. I was trying to hire for like a really perfect type of person. And then somebody was like, yeah, you're asking for someone analytical for a very creative position.
Huh.
Like, I don't think that person exists. And after thinking about it, was like, yeah, you're entirely right. It doesn't. I want you to be a math savant while also having perfect grammar and awesome alliteration and everything. It's like, nope. Not going to happen. So, yeah.
How did it work for you? Did you outsource? Did you hire a in-house employee? Did you have a challenge? How'd you do writing the job description? Tell us about it. Reach out in the show notes. You'll find the connections there. We'd be anxious to hear, and then perhaps share in a future episode some of the responses that we've received. Also, Dan referred to our previous episode, which focused on when to hire, and Brigitte talked about some tools you could use. Those are linked in that episode as well. So if you didn't hear that or any of the other previous episodes, again, show notes, friends, go down there and check it out. Click the link and join us again on What the Biz. Thanks for being with us.